Episode 20, the greatest professional football kicker ever, Morten Andersen. Welcome to The Art of Excellence, a show about people doing extraordinary things in their lives. I'm your host, Glenn Zweig. Thanks for joining me. My guest today is Morten Andersen. Morten is a former professional football kicker. He spent most of his career with the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons. He played in a record 382 games during his 25-year career and is the all-time leading scorer in NFL history with 2,544 points. In 2017, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. These days, Morten is a motivational speaker and also oversees his family foundation. He resides in Atlanta, Georgia. Morten, welcome to the program.
It's good to be with you.
Let's go back to the early days in Denmark. What was your life like growing up in Denmark?
I would say by American standards, pretty normal. School, sports. We didn't have the distraction of the World Wide Web or cell phones, so it was basically go outside and play all day, and when the sun sets, we'll ring the dinner bell and you come in and eat. And so after school activities were filled with outdoor activities, sports, and mainly for me. I was very much involved in soccer, team handball. I was a gymnast. So my childhood, which was a beautiful, beautiful experience, I think, what I remember of it. My mom and dad were educators. My father was a school psychologist, and my mother was a teacher and a school librarian. So we came from families who valued academics highly, and so, school was important.
So given the academic orientation, where did the sports come from? Were you a pretty competitive kid?
Yeah, I was extremely type A, competitive. OCD wasn't on the radar screen at that point, but I was obsessive compulsive, I think, really at an early age. I would study, make sure I got A's. It was very important to me to be the best at what I did. I would always challenge my parents. I remember one instance where we were out in the woods, and my mother, we were there to collect chanterelles, mushrooms in the forest, and we're driving down a gravel road, and I told my dad to stop the car because we was going maybe 20 miles an hour. I said, I can run faster than you can drive this car, down this gravel road. And of course he left me in the dust and I was furious. And so this was one of the early examples of this youthful oblivion and this unrealistic kind of expectation of my ability, but I always was striving, I think, to do things that perhaps weren't normal.
And you think it was pretty much internally driven? It wasn't so much influence of your parents or peers or anything like that?
No, they were not competitive natured at all. I mean, they were solid parents. They were they were just focusing on the core family values and raising two boys and staying busy with that and their own jobs. I never got the feeling that they were highly competitive. My dad played team handball, which was when he was younger, and my mother was a gymnast, but it wasn't on a extreme competitive level. So I'm not really sure where I got it from. I think from television and watching other sports heroes of mine in soccer. I think I aspired in some way to become like them.
Well, let's talk about the soccer, or I guess as you would call in Europe, football, right?
Yeah, football.
I read that you had just missed becoming a member of the Danish junior national soccer team. Is that true?
Yeah, soccer and handball teams, actually, both, at 16 years of age.
Was that hard to go through?
It was hard to leave. This was right around the time when I was coming to the United States as an exchange student, and the decision was basically if I stay in Denmark, I would continue down that path of seeing how good I could get at these two sports, which I definitely think I was heading in the direction of having an opportunity, whether it would have happened or not, I don't know, but having an opportunity to become a professional athlete in Europe. But that all changed once I made the decision together with the family to come over here for 10 months and become an exchange student.
Before we get to the journey here, back to the soccer, were you hoping to become a professional soccer player?
Yeah, that was definitely, Glenn, that was on the radar screen for sure. There was definitely something that I felt might be realistic. My first priority was to try to make the national team as a junior, which I think I would have had I stayed. And the same in team handball. I actually think I might have been a better team handball player than a soccer player, but we'll just never know. It was just the timing of the exchange program hit right when I was 17 years old. On my 17th birthday, really, I landed in Indianapolis. So we'll just never know. But I definitely think had I stayed, I would have had an opportunity to go to the next level in those sports.
Did those sports generally come pretty easy to you, or was it you're working your tail off to get good at them because you were so competitive?
I would say a little bit of both. I think I was a tall kid. I was a big boy, and athletic. And I also think playing several different sports helped me a lot. Being a gymnast helped me with my core strength and flexibility. The team handball helped me with my jumping and the plyometrics, and soccer with the small twitch muscle fibers and quick movements and so forth. So there were things in each sport that I could incorporate into the others, and vice versa. So I think being versatile is always a good idea.
So let's go ahead to your coming to the United States. I think the original intent was just to spend a year here, but I don't think back in that day studying overseas was all that common. So I was curious what prompted you to want to come over here.
Yeah, actually, I came with like 300 other students from Scandinavia, so it was a charter flight. It was a big airplane full of teenagers heading all over America.
So you're a 17-year-old studying over here in America, and then one day you discovered some talent that would forever change your life. Talk about that.
Yeah, I wanted to play soccer. That was what I was hoping to do, but the team, the high school didn't have a soccer team, so that was eliminated right off the bat. The idea was presented to me that we really need a kicker. The kicker we have right now is our starting quarterback, and we'd really like him to focus on being the starting quarterback, and I think he played free safety too on defense, so kicking was a possibility, so I literally just tried out. I wasn't that interested in the beginning.
Did you even know anything about football? Did you ever play football? Did you ever watch football?
I knew nothing about it. Yeah, when I saw the shape of the ball, I was like, oh man, it's not round.
What do I do with that?
What do I do with this? I can kick a round one, but I don't know if I can kick this shape. And so it was trial by error. The game was foreign to me too. It looked violent. It is violent. It just looked like a pile of bodies, and then once in a while a stretcher would come in and another body would come in there in place of the guy being carried out. And I don't know, it just looked very confusing to me, and I didn't really want to be part of any of that debacle. And my host brothers just said, listen, you just got to kick and run off the field. And, when I tried out, we really didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, I could have been horrible at it, but, the ball flew high and true. And I think pretty quickly they realized they had a guy that might be their kicker.
And as I understand it, not only do they realize they have a kicker for the high school team, but within one single year of playing, you're offered a full ride at Michigan State.
Yeah, that was crazy.
So looking back, do you think all of these other sports you were mentioning before, all of them gave you something? The soccer and the handball and the gymnastics. You kick a ball you've never kicked before, and suddenly you're on the team, and the next thing you know, you're going to Michigan State. Are you just one of these natural athletes, or do you think it was years and years of the cumulative effect of all these other sports that enabled you to do something that quickly?
I did have above average talent, but I had a work ethic that was, pretty unusual, and it's hard to talk about that, without sounding braggadocious, but I was just very disciplined and very type A and very controlling in the way I wanted to affect my behavior. I was very clean in the way that I lived and just very disciplined. And in high school, I was on the gymnastics team, and I was in the spring, I was on the track team. So I long jumped, and I was running the 880 relay. I was running the 110s, the 220s. So it wasn't just one sport. I was always involved in seasonal sports, and I just think that really helped me a lot to keep the mind fresh, but also to train the body in different ways.
So let's dig into this discipline you're talking about. Walk me through the training that you had to do at that level, both during the season and off season, to stay at the level you wanted to stay at.
Well, I think it became much more structured as I matured and I got older out of necessity. In the beginning, it was really more trial and error and just work hard, but really without a purposeful plan. I was just trying to, it was new to me. I was trying to become as good as possible. I really didn't have anybody to teach me how to kick, for example. So it was a lot of watching the pros, watching college kickers, and emulating sort of what I felt worked. And then really just feeling the ball on the foot and watching it in the air and understanding that I have to get this ball to fly vertically. You know, if it's laying down, it's probably hooking. And I had to figure out that workbench that was so important, and defining it and training it and owning it. But that came much later. That came on the professional level. I would say during high school and college, most of the time was really, it was trial and error, but it wasn't a discipline yet for me as far as that I really knew what I was doing. I was just doing it.
So once you get to the pros, between the exercise regimen, watching tape, going over, kick after kick, are we talking an hour a day? Are we talking 8 hours a day? Like, how much time is this to get yourself to that level where when you're called, you can do what you need to do?
That was a full-time job. What I like about pro sports is there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then there's a debrief period, and then you reboot the computer and you do it again the next year. Despite the results, you go again. You have another chance. You have another game. You have another kick. You have another season. And I love that about it. So I spent a lot of time preparing, not only physically but mentally, and understanding what my craft was and delving into one of the most important components for any athlete is what's called the moment of truth. And the moment of truth for me as a kicker was when the plant foot hits the ground. You're either right or wrong. You can't change anything. For a golfer, it's when he takes the swing, he takes the club back. It's coming down either right or wrong. Free throws, shooters, when they stand there and they release the ball, it's either right or wrong. Moments of truths are everywhere in life, and especially evident in sports. You have to own those moments. You have to own the workbench, and for me, that was that little area where the ball was put down, and when my plant foot hit the ground, it was either right or wrong. So as I matured, I spent a lot of time delving into understanding what it is kinesthetically that I have to do to produce a vertical ball flight to the target every time. And once I could do that, we reached a level of excellence that was really was special, because you could do something at a level of unconscious competence, which is really where we all want to get to.
It's just muscle memory, in other words.
Yeah, muscle memory, where you just do it, no thinking.
Was this really all you sort of training, coaching yourself, or did you have those that were watching your techniques and giving you feedback and that type of thing?
Yeah, so I had help starting in 1989 when I hit a kind of a performance plateau, I would say, with the Saints. Started with New Orleans in 82, and about 7 years into it, I'm turning 30, and I had a year that, by my standards, wasn't as good as the others. And one thing for sure is you're either getting better or worse. You're never staying the same as an athlete. So at that point, I had to take a humility pill. I had to realize that I had to change my behavior significantly to extend my career and to stay at a high level. And that's when I hired Mackie Shilstone, who's a sports fitness consultant. I hired John Silva out of North Carolina, University of North Carolina, who was a sports psychologist, and I hired the best chiropractor, massage therapist I could find, and I hired all these people that became part of my team Andersen, became part of my circle of trust, and together we started creating a plan that really blossomed and extended my career greatly.
Well, like all other sports, football has both a physical and a mental component. You sort of touched on that. talk about the mental aspect of the game, because I would suspect, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's probably more important for kickers than almost any other position, just given how isolated you are out there.
Yeah, so it's right between the ears, and a lot of it is you are what you think you are, and you earn the right to play the game at the highest level on Sunday. You earn that Monday through Sunday. It's not one day you come in for 3 hours and you have a great performance. So I think having this anticipatory management where you're able to create scenarios in practice that are really difficult, really tough. I'll give you an example. My whole career I kicked on 8-foot goalposts. The real goalposts are 18 feet 6 inches. But I kicked on 8-foot goalposts Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Because on Sunday, when I got to the game, and there's going to be enough distractions on game day anyway, those goalposts looked pretty big to me.
Was that a pretty common technique that a lot of people were using? Or
I think not back then, no. I was the first guy doing that. And, of course, Arena Ball and Arena League, they started doing 8-foot goalposts. And now you see them all over training camps. They have the smaller goalposts. But this was something that was pretty revolutionary back in the early 80s. And it was just something that made sense to me. If you aim for the middle, because the middle never changes, when you get into the game, you have a larger scale, and it's a beautiful thing to have that margin of error that's bigger.
Right, but Morten, it's one thing kicking a 50 or 60-yard or during warm-ups. It's an entirely different beast doing so under the camera in front of 60,000 fans when the game's on the line. So I guess I'm curious what separates those who crack more often under the pressure from those who don't.
Well, it's will. It's the intent, the deliberate intent, purpose, and will to want to be in those situations, to embrace uncomfortable, to embrace the distasteful. Not everybody likes that. I would venture to guess most people don't like it. I know the number one phobia in the world is public speaking. People are extremely uncomfortable getting up in front of other people. For an athlete, the 80,000 people and the millions watching, that's white noise. For an athlete, the secret sauce is that you control two components in your behavior, effort and attitude, and everything else is white noise. You can't control the wind, the surface, time of game, home or away, night or day. You don't control that. It just is. Once you realize as an athlete that let's own the workbench, let's define it, let's train it, let's own it. Let's understand what the moment of truth are in my particular discipline. Let me bring effort, let me bring attitude to it. Let me bring will, perseverance, and all those things, and embrace the uncomfortable, because it is. High-performance business is not for weak people. It's for people who are willing to take risks that are unreasonable sometimes. The demands on high performers are unrealistic, unreasonable sometimes, and expectations are higher, but the rewards are also much higher in that rarefied air. And so I just realized that, hey, if I want to be great, I have to embrace the uncomfortable. I have to embrace this undesirable environment that a game-winning field goal is. This is not for the normal.
I get you don't want to toot your own horn, but I'm assuming at this level, the National Football League, by the time one has made it there and you are the first-string kicker on a professional team, you've already been able to do that. That's why you're there. And yet, if we look at all of these, there's only one Morten Andersen that has gotten to the Hall of Fame. So there's still something at that elite of the elite levels that's separating you from a lot of these others.
There are levels of elite. I'll give you the numbers in the Hall. 174 living Hall of Famers, 310 in Canton, Ohio. Out of millions of people that played the game, 27,000 have played it professionally. So if you take the 310 and divide it into 27,000, you're going to get a number around 0.006%. That's 6/1,000 of 1%. That's just to put in perspective what it means to get a gold jacket. That's the elite of the elite. But I think to more philosophically, to get to that level, you have to go places most people are not willing to go. and you have to do it longer because everybody's trying to take your job. You mentioned first-string kicker. There's only one guy. There's not a second-string kicker. There's one guy at that position. You have 32 jobs in the world at what I did. It's not like an offensive lineman that has a backup or quarterback who has a second or third-string guy in case he gets hurt. There's one kicker.
And you still distinguish yourself amongst those 32. So do you think it was the amount of practice? Was it the technique you were using during practice? Or was it back to this mental aspect that somehow everyone in a practice field could kick the same length, same accuracy, but come game time, that's where you separate the wheat from the chaff?
Yeah, I think it was all of it, but mostly it was the mental toughness, the mental strength to understand that when I took the field, that I had to let the game play me. I couldn't force myself on the game. A lot of young guys try to force themselves on the game. What I mean by that is, man, I hope I get a kick here in the first quarters because then I'm going. Then I'm off to a good start. Well, you may not get one till the third quarter. Or what if you miss the one in the first quarter? Does that define how you play the rest of the game? All these factors are all part of your coping mechanisms, your mastery skills. How do you digest and how do you move on from distasteful? If you have a failure, how do you move on from that? Because you may be needed in the fourth quarter to win it. Those are very important components to deal with. And if you don't have the skill set to do that, you're not going to make it because you will fail. Thank God, because you learn so much more anyway when you fail than when you succeed.
So on the topic of failure, let's talk about slumps. What was the worst one you had during your career?
Never used the word slump.
Why not?
Don't like the word. Because slump indicates that you're a place where you can't get out of.
Well, the next question is, how do you get out of it? What was the low point in your career? Put it that way.
There are challenges all the time. You miss a kick, you miss 2 in a row, you might miss 3 in a row sometimes. But the road to success is always under construction, the way I looked at it. I focused on the process much more than the results and the quality of the process. I think that was really important for me to be as good as I could doing training, and then on Sunday afternoon just let it go and be free and be an athlete. So I never looked at these situations where I struggled as a slump. I never used the word. I just said, hey, I'm going through some challenges right now, and I'm working through it. I know what I'm doing. They're going to get corrected. I never had long-standing situations where I went through several games where it was bad. I was able to fix things pretty quickly. I was very analytical, very objective. I looked at film. But also I wrote down. I took daily logs. I wrote everything down. So everything's documented. So I can go back and refer back to situations and learn from that. How was I feeling during this particular moment in the game? I do a debrief after each game where I write down all my sort of experiences. I have performance feedback sheets. I have my daily logs. I have my written down goals. I have a goal sheet. I have all these things that are on paper. And so I'm pretty quickly able to figure out what's going on and if it was up in the head or if it was a physical thing. But usually a physical thing, a behavior that manifests itself physically usually starts with a mental weakness or something that wasn't drilled home long enough. So it all starts with intent, and then it has to do with training positive behavior. And you want to make your positive behavior dominant behavior. That's the whole thing about being a top athlete. If you can do that, then you can get to that unconscious competence level. The problem is a lot of guys, younger guys especially, they don't know how to train positive behavior. They focus on negative behavior, and it gets in the way. It crowds in there, even though it's white noise. So the effort and attitude has to be focused on positive behavior, on your workbench, on the process, the right type of quality within the process. Then you'll have a desired result that's going to be beautiful.
Well, you had mentioned how at one point you had brought in this team Andersen,
Mm-hmm.
and amongst that team was a sports psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
So you hadn't used a sports psychologist previously. So I'm curious, what did that person do? What did they discuss with you? How do they help you in some way shift where your mindset was to all of a sudden change your trajectory back where you wanted it to go?
John helped me tremendously on many levels. I was a perfectionist, and that's really not a very healthy place to be as an athlete.
It's counterintuitive.
Sure, because you cannot set goals, and it goes back to goal setting. In the beginning of the year, you set goals for the year. Where do I want to be at the end? And I was setting goals that were so absolute and threatening and unrealistic that they weren't tools for me. John shifted my thinking completely. We started introducing goal windows, parameters. So if I hit those goal windows, still playing at a very high level.
What do you mean by a goal window?
So instead of saying I'm going to make 100% of my kicks, we introduced a notion of very simple. From 40 yards in, I should be 95 to 100%. Because really you should. From 40 yards in, you should pretty much make all the kicks. From 40 to 50, if I'm at 80 to 85%, that's a really good number for that range. And 50 and out, if I can hit 75% of those, really good numbers. Because if you set a goal that says I'm going to hit 100%, I miss one kick, the goal is out the window. What are you going to do the rest of the year? We set parameters. Goals should be motivational. They should be specific, and they should be subjective. They shouldn't just be absolute all the time. So the goal setting process was important that John kind of shifted my thinking on, and also this notion that nobody's perfect, and you have to give yourself a little leeway and not be so hard on yourself. I was always my own worst critic, and I got in my own way a lot. And once I learned to kind of let the game play me more than me playing the game, I played much better. I performed much better, especially in big moments.
Well, at some point, the Saints either traded you, didn't renew a contract. Of course, you went on to the Falcons to play years and years of incredible ball. So what happened with the Saints? And was that something you wanted, or was this a darker period in your career?
No, it was a very distasteful separation. They wanted to cut my salary 40%. I wasn't willing to do that, and they released me. And this was in the infancy of free agency, of salary cap restrictions. So a lot of teams really didn't understand how to manage it. It was a pretty simple equation. I was making $1 million. They wanted to take me to $600,000. I wasn't willing to do that, and that's when I left as a free agent.
Were your numbers down, or they were just saying you're getting toward that outer age in football and you're not going to last that much longer? What was behind that?
The official explanation was I was a declining player who couldn't hit the long ball anymore. They were concerned that I was, getting older and fat and happy in New Orleans, and so change sometimes is a really good motivator.
How old were you at this point?
So I left in 95, so I was 35.
Now, in all fairness, for most mortals, mid-30s,
Yeah.
That's pretty much it, right? Even for a kicker, you're not going that much longer.
No, you're not. A few guys will make it to 40, and of course, I made it to 47. What I needed to do was I needed to come to Atlanta, and I needed to establish, without saying anything, that what was presented when I left the Saints, that I was a declining player who couldn't hit the long ball. We had to put that to rest, and so that was put to rest in 95 when I broke an NFL record. I hit 8 from 50+, 3 in one game against the Saints. So I think that was resoundingly put to rest.
Was the Saints' attitude somehow an internal motivation for you?
Well, not so much that, just the change and the fact that was the official explanation.
You didn't feel like you had something to prove?
I didn't feel I had anything to prove. I wanted to prove that this was not true, and I wasn't close to being done. And as a matter of fact, I played another 12 years after I left the Saints.
47 years of age, you played till. So how do you account for the longevity that you had?
Yeah, I think I trained smarter, and my diet was better, and I just did things just smarter. One of the things I did that I really think helped me was from the end of the season until June 1st, I didn't kick a ball. I was in the gym, I was doing my workouts, I was doing sport-specific training, I was doing a lot of exercises that had to do with kicking, but I was not putting the foot to the ball. And so when I got to June, I was quite hungry to get started. And
was that more about resting your leg or resting your mind in between?
Both. Mostly the mind. Because you go through 17 weeks plus the playoffs, plus 4 or 5 weeks of preseason. It is a long grind. And you got to be up for every week because there are guys waiting to take your job. That was not something I was focused on, but you know that in this business, I mean, I was watching a game the other day. The Redskins were playing Philly on Monday night, and the Redskins, they had a stat. They had another kicker now for the Redskins. And so since 2008, that's 9-10 years ago, they've had 21 guys, 21 kickers. That's just unheard of, that you just change that position that quickly. What you really want to have at that position is stability, the same guy every year. So, it was just one of those things where, I knew that if I prepared the right way and trained the right way, I could play for a really long time. And I just became smarter the older I got.
Can you recall the feeling you had when you finally came to the final game of your career, the final kick? What was sort of going through your mind then?
Yeah, we're playing the Seahawks in the Georgia Dome. I had 4 field goals that game. I became the oldest special teams player of the week in the NFC at 47. It was a great way to end. We won the game. We didn't have a successful year. We didn't go to the playoffs in 07, but it was a really satisfying experience in 07. I had my best year statistically in all 25 years in 2007 at age 47.
It's incredible. So was there ever a plan B? Like, what if you never made it to the professional ranks? What if the career was cut short with some sort of injury after the first season? What then?
Well, I had studied communications and German and marketing and French at Michigan State. My initial desire was to work at the United Nations as an interpreter or be in international business. So that was my fallback. That never really came to fruition. I didn't have to pull the trigger on plan B. But I'd say I use a lot of the skills that I learned in college too. I use that today in my business with my event planning and with Morten Andersen Global and with the international consulting I do, and certainly public speaking and doing appearances and in the nonprofit arena, meeting with corporate sponsors and understanding how we have to help each other, and that a good business is always a business where both parties feel like they win. I think that's really important. It's been a great ride so far. I really enjoy what I'm doing now. It took me a while after I retired to find my way. It took me a good year and a half where I probably wasn't the greatest guy to live with, and it also took my wife to tell me get on with it, And it was a very healthy dialogue her and I had, and I'm in a very good place right now.
That's always a question I have with someone that was anywhere near the level you were at, which is you've got such this high level of success. I mean, you've reached the peak, the pinnacle of this career that's so high profile that how do you ever replace that sense of accomplishment and fulfillment once it's over?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a very good it's a question my psychiatrist asked me too. When I went to him, and I went to him, I went to get some help initially for a couple of months. And then I started asking him more questions, and he was asking me, and he said, it's time for you to go. You're done here. So we worked through the things. But one of the interesting things he said is, hey, you might want to have a little ceremony where you're burying your left shoe. Have a funeral for your left kicking shoe, because that's over with. Can't hold on to it. It was a huge part of your life, 25 years plus 4 in college, 1 in high school, 30 years of your life you spent doing this. But that feeling is never coming back. You have to wrap your head around that one. And I think that's what took me a while. Even though I played so long, even though I knew it was coming to an end, once it was over, there was still a void. And I think maybe the best answer is just to, let it happen. I think I maybe jumped into something too quickly afterwards, and I just wasn't ready mentally to start a new venture. So take some time, digest it, celebrate it, and then refocus, because you still have all the skill set of discipline, of working hard, and a tremendous network, thank God, that I was able to keep through football, treating people the right way. So the network was great. And then get on with your life and do something. But you'll never have, Glenn, that adrenaline rush of Sunday afternoon winning a game and the lights are on. And, you may get it a little bit when you close a deal or something in business, or the sense of satisfaction after a speech that went well and people were happy and applauded and came up to you and said, "No, we really got a lot of takeaways from that. That was great. That was entertaining. That was insightful." that makes me feel great too. So there's so many other things now to celebrate and to fill your life, my life, with purpose. And that's really, to me now, is the most important thing, is purposeful living.
Well, this year was the year you were finally inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. There's only 2 kickers, you and one other.
Well, it's Jan Stenerud and myself.
In the whole history of the game, place kickers, just 2. So what does that mean to you?
It's a tremendous honor, and it's great to be in there with Jan now. Jan was a pioneer in soccer-style kicking with the Kansas City Chiefs, and Jan was really the first guy that I sort of looked to as a mentor, as somebody who was very good. He was from Norway. He is from Norway and came here to Montana State on a ski jumping scholarship, and his journey is quite interesting too, and ended up in the Hall of Fame after having played, I think, 21 years he played, and played at a very high level at the end of his career with Green Bay and Minnesota, and that was really an inspiration to watch him play when he was in his early 40s. And I think I learned a lot from him. So it's a great honor to be in there with him and just to be in with all those other great players and men of character.
Well, these days, you've got your hands full with all sorts of activities, it sounds like. Amongst them, speaking to executives of corporations around the country, maybe around the world. So I assume you must be trying to draw parallels somehow between football and business. I was curious what some of those are.
Well, the notion of having a certain kind of stubbornness, having the right kind of stubbornness, when your back's against the wall, and you see this in businesses all the time, people are trying to make budgets, trying to increase earnings and cut costs, but also there's challenges with human resources and so many things a CEO has to manage through. And I think it's so imperative for leaders also have the will, but also have the right kind of stubbornness to be able to hold ground, and when your back's against the wall, to those traits that most people don't like to talk about, neediness, selfishness, stubbornness, all of these things come to the forefront, and they can help you in these perceived pressure situations.
You see executives being held back because they don't have the right mindset.
I think so, yeah. Scared of failure. I think the successful ones fail, and they fail gallantly. They fail big, and then they recover, and then they have great success. I think there are numerous examples from successful companies where initially it was a great fail, something wasn't working, and then there was a redirect. There was a coping with the failure, then a redirect, then an increased desire and intent and sense of purpose moving forward with even more fervor, with even more fire. And I think that's very attractive, and I think that's necessary. I don't think I've ever learned as much from having my hands over my head in celebration than when I was on my butt on the ground. I think I learned a lot more from failure than success.
Do you buy into the adage that if you follow your passion, success will follow you? Or do you find that saying overly simplistic, if not misleading?
Yeah, I don't think passion alone is enough. I think it starts with intent, purpose. You bring passion to that process over a period of time, good or bad, with will, with stubbornness, the right kind of stubbornness, and perseverance, and you go, and you don't deviate. But you stay in the moment. I think it's really important to stay in the moment, live in the now. There's no other place we can possibly be anyway than right here, right now. And so to stay in the moment, but also be prepared and plan. But then once you have the plan, initiate the plan, stay in the moment, and just plod away. And listen to people. Have mentors. Listen to people. Other people are smart. You're not the smartest guy in the room all the time. I don't pretend to be. I'm willing to increase my Team Andersen roster at any moment because people can help you and you can help them.
Well, looking back over your career, over your life for that matter, who would you say had the greatest influence over you?
Probably my grandmother. She was a midwife. She's passed now, but she was She was a lady that understood purposeful living and also staying in the moment, being there every day. She saw so many lives being born, coming into this world, and she was in a sidecar during World War II in Copenhagen when the British were bombing the Nazis when they had occupied Denmark. She was being driven around by a Nazi soldier in a sidecar delivering babies. That's not embracing the uncomfortable. I don't know what is. But she came out beautifully on the other side and continued to become a midwife. Was a midwife for 40 years and was just a beautiful soul. Just a great, gentle human being. We took so many vacations. Her and my grandfather and my brother and I. When Mom and Dad were away on trips, we would go with them, and those are some of my fondest memories that I have.
Was she able to see you any part of your career?
Yeah, she saw me in New Orleans and spent a lot of time in New Orleans. She loved the city of New Orleans and the jazz and the food and the people there, and we just had a great time down the bayou.
And would she ever try to distill grandmotherly wisdom to you?
I think she was very proud, and I think it was overwhelming to her sometimes to try to wrap her head around all the popularity and the fans and that whole environment. Her advice to me always was just be you, be yourself. Don't be a fake and don't be cocky and arrogant. Just be yourself and stay humble and work like you are.
If you could go back in time, give the young Morten Andersen, first arriving in the United States for the very first time, some life advice, what would it be?
Try to give yourself a break sometimes. Nobody's perfect. Having played for them many years, it was a very narcissistic business. It was becoming self-absorbed was easy to do, and I probably did at times, so I regret that a little bit. It was a selfish existence because it almost demanded that you were so single-minded of purpose. Perhaps if I went back in time, I would say give yourself and others maybe a little bit more of a break and don't be so stubborn. Don't be that wrong kind of stubborn.
It's a fine line, I guess.
It is.
The name of this podcast is called The Art of Excellence. So what's your definition of excellence?
Well, excellence to me is owning something, owning your skill set, whatever that is, to the point where you can replicate it at the highest level unconsciously. And excellence needs to be evident. It needs to be undeniable. People, when they see it, will recognize it. They understand that this human being is involved with something and doing it at the highest level. And that takes training, that takes discipline, that takes skill, it takes talent, and it takes embracing the uncomfortable, embracing sometimes experiences that others are not willing to do. So excellence has to be earned. It's not a right. It's a privilege. It's a privilege that's earned through extremely hard work and high demands on yourself and others.
That's a good answer. Morten, this has been incredible. I can't thank you enough for being a part of the show and sharing your life story, and it's been a great interview. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. You can subscribe to the show at iTunes, Stitcher, and theartofexcellence.com. I've got one small favor to ask. If you like the show, please take a minute and leave us a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate that. I'll see you next time.